This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex, and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Welcome, George.
Good morning, Dr. Marlene, at least in our time zone. It's great to be with you again.
Yes, well, good to have you here. So I had told you that I would send you some talking points that I never got sent. And so, full disclosure to the audience, any faux pas that you make, it's my fault. But what we're going to talk about today, which is a crucially important subject, are the rules of co-parenting that people don't bother to find out. And then they end up fighting about them. And there are some simple, basic rules that we follow. And I know every jurisdiction is different. So let's start there. Because I've had people ask me, George, why don't we just have written rules that we all know what they are? Well, every jurisdiction is different, or at least every state is different. And I'm going to let you explain that because I'm not the legal expert and I don't know how all that works. But am I correct?
Yeah, I think you are, and I think there is variation from state to state. We're most familiar with Colorado,
Yes,
and
because that's where we are.
that's where we are.
Yes.
So I think that's important, and people should familiarize themselves with rules that are local to their jurisdiction.
Yes. Well, and even the list of rule or, the handouts I have for the level 2 co-parenting class, because it's pretty extensive. It goes into a lot more detail than the level 1. Now, the problem is people here anyway are only required to take level 1. And I think what happens is parents don't want to take any longer class than they have to. And so they put pressure on people who make these decisions to keep the class at 2 hours or 4 hours. Ours is actually the level 1 is about an hour and a half. By the time we ask questions and cover everyone's things they need to know and cover their cases and all that, it's about 2 hours. But that's it. And you cannot know 2 hours worth of co-parenting stuff and feel like you're prepared for the next 15 years of co-parenting your child, because there's just a lot more information than that. And the level 2 class, of course, is an 8-hour class. And people moan and groan when I tell them that. And it honestly doesn't take 8 hours, but it does take a good 5 or 6 hours. So there is that much information that people need to know that they don't know. Then they get upset with people like me or the people who make these decisions in the courts because they don't want to spend that long. Well, do you want to know what you need to know or not? That's my thought.
Well, not only that, but it influences a lifetime of relationships with their children, the children with siblings, and so forth. So it's really quite important, and it's a lifetime endeavor.
Yes, yes, it absolutely is. Because things also change as your kids get older. And we also are always still our kids' parents. So even after they, what I call age out and turn 18 and are no longer required to do anything that the court says the parents have to do, we still have to parent them, and we have to co-parent even when they're adults, because things will come up: college graduation, birth of a child, wedding. Hopefully those happen in the reverse order of what I just said. But um, but those things come up, and you both have to be present. And so you need to know how healthy co-parenting looks, what that looks like. And a lot of people really don't know.
No, I think that's true, and there's a lot to be learned. The children don't come with manuals, and neither
No.
does a divorce or a separation. It doesn't come with a manual. So the closest we get to it coming with a manual would be attending those classes and courses on co-parenting.
Right. Right.
And the thing to I think to point out to people is, yes, it takes some time, but oh, is it a worthy investment of your time? And I think
Yes.
the answer there is a resounding yes.
Yes. Yes. It absolutely is. Well, and what's funny is I have parents at the end of the class tell me all the time, "This was the best class I have ever taken. I am so glad I took this. I learned so much." And yet they resist. They resist with the court, with their attorney, with me when they finally get to me and we're scheduling the class, and they're complaining. And at the end, they loved it. They loved it. And so I'm not sure what the resistance is, but we'll dive in and talk about some of these rules that people don't know. Because if you don't know what the rules are that you're playing by, you end up going into court, and maybe unbeknownst to your attorney, you've done something that you really shouldn't have done. And now the judge is scolding you, and you had no idea. Well, that's why you're going to have to take it upon yourself to take a class, even if you aren't court ordered to, and find out what those rules are.
Well, I think that's true, and people get a good start, I think, on their post decree or post separation co-parenting if they will educate themselves to those rules and follow them, at least for the most part. Um, a
Yeah.
good effort can be made, and people still make mistakes and so forth. We understand that. We understand that it's difficult to be angry and hurt and set those feelings aside for the benefit of your children. But it is, as I say, a lifelong endeavor. And so I think anybody who understands that would say it's a worthy investment of my time to learn to navigate co-parenting rules and what to avoid.
Yes, yes, especially what to avoid. I'll give one. I mean, this is simple, this is basic. This doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. It happened yesterday. Um, I've got the mom texting me that she had reached out to the new stepmom and was telling me when the stepmom is available to bring two of the children in to meet with me. Well, I don't schedule that with mom. I schedule that with dad and stepmom. But dad's out of the country. And so mom takes it upon herself to reach out to stepmom, and then reaches out to me and says she's available this Saturday. And I am working this Saturday, but I happen to be full, as you might imagine, because when I do work Saturday, everyone wants Saturday, of course. But I just don't let a parent get involved in what the other parent is doing. I don't tell them when I scheduled their appointments. I might tell them I've scheduled the kids, but not that other parent. And this is where, right off the bat, first thing I think co-parents need to learn is there are boundaries in place now that never used to be in place when you were together. You don't get to know everything about your ex-spouse that you got to know about your spouse. And that's hard for people. They're used to just asking this person, demanding to know what they're doing and when. And they don't have to tell you that anymore. So I'll stop right there and let you comment on that.
No, I think that's very true. And sometimes it's hard for particularly somebody who's been controlling to now
Mhm.
encounter a situation where they're totally not in control. They're not going to be able to be in control. And so there is an adjustment, I think,
Mhm.
particularly depending on personalities and past history of behavior.
Yes, yes. And if there's an adjustment with one parent being controlling for the other, you can imagine the adjustment when a parent who's maybe been primary caregiver, maybe a stay at home parent or something, now finds out that you don't get to know what your kids are doing when they're with the other parent. And they're like, but I'm still their parent, right? But on the other parent's parenting time, you don't get to know where they are, what they're doing. The only thing you have any say so over is if an issue of endangerment arises. And people don't realize endangerment may not be what you and I think of as endangerment. Often, what you and I think of as endangerment to the court is just bad parenting or maybe really bad parenting, but it doesn't rise to the level of endangerment. And so I'll let you speak to that. That's a high threshold to meet, isn't it?
It really is because it requires the court to make a finding or a conclusion of significant emotional impairment or physical endangerment. And those are
Yeah.
pretty high standards to meet for example, for a modification. But those are the standards of endangerment, significant emotional impairment or physical endangerment. And oftentimes a parent thinks bad parenting is endangering a child when it really isn't. It's
Right.
frustrating to the parent, perhaps. Uh, the parent feels a lack of control, a lack of participation, but they're going to have to learn to let go and not what we call helicopter parenting around the other parent's time.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And if a parent has an issue with something the other parent did, they need to address it with the other parent and not the child. And that's another rule of co-parenting that parents don't realize is you don't talk to your kids about it. You take the information in and then you contact the other parent. But you get a lot of parents who start spouting off about your dad is just so inept. Your mom is just so irresponsible. And that is not the right way to handle it either.
No, there's no question about that. To put that on the child or the children is grossly unfair to the child or the children.
Yeah.
And the parent needs to understand that. The parent needs to understand that there are going to be times where they feel lonely. They miss their children when they're with the other parent. We understand that, but you might as well get used to it because that's the way things are going to play out for a number of years, depending on the age of the children.
Yes. Yes. And putting them in the middle is so unfair to them because they have a need, an innate need to love both parents. And so when we start putting down the other parent, yeah, were you going to comment?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of times what I do is initially I direct the parent to the parenting plan. If they come in to me and they have a problem, they have a complaint, the first thing I'm going to do is say, "Hey, let's look at your parenting plan." That's a court order. And what
Yeah.
is that? What is that direct? And oftentimes, the resolution of the issue or the problem is contained within the parenting plan, and the parent just didn't consult that or look to the parenting plan for resolution. But oftentimes, the resolution is within the parenting plan, and we don't need to go any further than just addressing the parenting plan's resolution of that
Reading
issue.
the plan. Yes, yes. Read your plan, follow what it says.
Definitely,
Because
definitely.
you don't know how many times I'll ask parents. I mean, this happens on a weekly basis. I will ask a parent something about what's in their parenting plan, and they aren't able to tell me. They don't know. They have to look. And that's okay. But what's even funnier than that, that's kind of one extreme. They don't know what's in their own plan. What's even funnier, well, it's not funny to me, but I have parents who expect me to know everything in their plan. It's like, well, you've got the plan. And I'm like, you think I have all the plans memorized of all the people I work with? I mean, it's just not even realistic. And once I say that, of course, then they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm sure you can't know all that off the top of your head. Well, no, you don't even know your own plan, but I'm supposed to know 30 different parenting plans. But anyway, um, also, we have been talking recently. We just had, I think, our last show on plans needing to change as kids grow up. And I think that just bears repeating too, real quickly here, is that plans will need to change as kids grow up. And we'll talk about that more when we come back, actually. Let's take a quick break. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we're talking about plans needing to change as kids get older. And we did a whole show on this. But as I said before we went to break, I think it bears repeating that do not think your plan is going to be what it is now until your child reaches 18, unless they're 16 or 15 or something. As the child ages, it's going to have to change, right, George?
I think so, but it's a terribly difficult issue because if that change involves a parent lessening the amount of time that they have, they're going to be very hard pressed to give that up. They're going to be very territorial about that time. So it's a difficult issue, and one that is we don't have a parenting plan for a 3-year-old that's going to be suitable for a 14-year-old.
Right, right. And that's my point. And I don't know that the amount has to change unless it's a baby. You know, with babies, that's different. But for most kids, the amount can be pretty constant. But what the schedule looks like is going to be different. And so that, like I said, I think that just bears repeating whenever we're talking about plans and co-parenting, and because you get parents who say, no, we've always done it this way, we're sticking with it, and it's like it's not age appropriate for your child at this point.
Yeah, I think
you know
that's true. And even if the only changes that need to be addressed are transportation issues, for example.
yes. Well, to that point, I had a hearing earlier this week, and the parents are high conflict, and when I say high conflict, I mean high conflict. And because a lot of cases, I would say most cases, if not all that I get, are high conflict because they only need me if they're high conflict. But in this case, one parent wanted to move, and it's a now 12-year-old child, wanted to move from a 5225, where one parent has Monday and Tuesday every week, the other parent Wednesday and Thursday every week, and then they alternate Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Wanted to go from that to a week on, week off. Well, let me tell you, the judge jumped right on that and said, yes, your child's old enough now. It's time to move from the 5225 to the week on, week off because, and he cited this in his ruling, the parents are so high conflict, the fewer exchanges they have and the less contact they have with each other, the better. And so, even if your child's needs don't change, your conflict that continues is something that we need to avoid exposing the child to.
I think that's true. And again, the parents are needing to be willing to sacrifice some of their desires
Mhm,
uh, for the benefit of the child's age appropriate scheduling
mhm.
uh, and exchange. And I think a judge is going to be receptive to some minor changes. It's not a big deal. If it's a major change, that's another situation entirely. But the other thing that I want to stress is if it's a high conflict case, the lawyers are typically not peacemakers. We're warriors, and
Yes.
we're going to take any little faux pas or any inappropriate act and blow it up and make it look like that person is irresponsible as could be, and really
Mhm.
the children would be better off without that parent in their lives at all, and off we go. So it's really and it becomes self-perpetuating, that type of the anger and the fighting. Um, because as I've said before, parents don't litigate their way to a healthy co-parenting
No,
relationship.
no. Unfortunately, they don't. If it was that simple, then I would advocate going to court all the time, but it's not,
No, and we
for
can
sure.
end up with kind of an armed camp situation by going to court. But a
Yes.
healthy co-parenting relationship where the children feel that they're not the focal point of conflict, and their best interests are prioritized over, if need be, the conveniences of a parent, then that's a sacrifice that parents should be willing to make.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I'm going to start with, I think the biggest problem I see, and we've already been touching on it, when it comes to the rules of co parenting. And I kind of mentioned it, at the top of the hour that you're not going to have control over what the other parent does. And this is probably the biggest one of all, but I'm actually going to read because I did bring this item. I'm going to read what um, our rules of the level 2 co-parenting class, well maybe I am, what it says, about this item. um, but this is really hard for people to accept, and we're going to break it down a little bit, the not having control. But let's get into some detail here. Co-parents are expected to understand the boundaries between the two households and respect those boundaries. Each parent is the head of their own household, and as a result is allowed to make decisions within that household without asking permission from or consulting the other parent. This includes, but is not limited to, decisions on chores, allowances, television watching, video games, bedtimes, homework, food, and clothing. And how many times have you and I heard a parent complaining about what the other parent feeds the child? Like they have fast food every meal. Nobody cares. They're being fed. We care if they aren't being fed. That's endangerment. And if you're feeding sugar to a diabetic child, that might be considered endangerment. But short of something like that, what they feed the child is up to them, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think sometimes if you have high conflict parents and you can anticipate it and still get to construct a parenting plan, then you can put things in there like it's the decision of the parent of the moment whether the child is too ill to go to school.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh my gosh.
that's a
I'm glad
biggie.
you, it is. It is. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one I hear about all the time. And here's the way I'm approached. I'll get a call from a parent and they'll say, my ex kept our child home from school the other day because he or she was sick and didn't consult with me. And they took her or didn't take her to the doctor and didn't consult with me. And we have joint decision making. Okay, joint decision making are for major decisions, not for day to day decisions. So, whether or not your child stays home from school and consequently whether or not they go to the doctor is totally up to that parent. Now, before I say anything else or let you talk, I will say, as a courtesy, you should let the other parent know. I mean, just send them a text or a message on whatever parenting app you're using and say, I've kept Susie home from school today. She's not feeling well. She's not so sick yet that I'm taking her to the doctor. But if she gets any worse, I may. If I do, I'll let you know, and I'll let you know what the doctor says. Something like that. Just a courtesy message. She's homesick. We haven't gone to the doctor yet. If we do, I'll let you know. But I get parents who say they can't do that. We have joint decision making. That is purely a day to day decision. And you're each allowed to make those on your own. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think, again, that lack of control is a
Mhm,
challenge more so for
mhm.
some parents than others. But certainly those day-to-day decisions are to be made by the parent of the moment. When they can be synchronized and they tend to make decisions the same way, I would think that consistency is probably reassuring for the child.
Right, right, right. And another item that was mentioned there, speaking of consistency for the child, is the first thing that popped into my head. And it was included in that list also are bedtimes, bedtimes for children. It came up in that hearing the other day, the same hearing I was talking about, where they went to a week on, week off. The one parent commented that she will sometimes hear, well, now I revealed which parent, but it doesn't matter. It goes both ways often. That she often hears from the child or somehow knows the child is on her phone at 11 o'clock at night. Well, she's 13. I doubt, in fact, dad said, no, I don't let her stay up until 11 o'clock at night at age 13. The kids have phones and they sometimes sneak them. A parent will trust them with the phone. I don't have to take it from you at night, but the child can't sleep. And, my thought when I heard this was, well, mom, you ought to be glad she's texting you when she can't sleep and not texting friends and staying up even later, you know. But parents don't have any control over things like bedtimes. And in this case, it wasn't a bedtime issue. Dad said, no, no, she doesn't get to stay up until 11. If she was on her phone, I didn't know it. And again, kids will do this. Even if you take the phone, they'll sneak out and find it and take it to their room and use it. You know, I mean, that's just the nature of kids. But things like bedtimes, you're not going to have any control over. However, to your point, George, about as consistent as parents can be, it's better for the child. I totally agree. And I actually have a famous story of a 7-year-old who one parent was putting him to bed at 7:30 because of their schedule in the morning. The other was letting him stay up until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Well, he was struggling at school. And the teacher had brought that to my and the parents' attention that, some weeks he's fine, everything's done, he's well rested. Other weeks he doesn't have his homework done, he's fallen asleep in class, he looks disheveled, that kind of thing. And so we got the parents on the same page. I asked them, hey, 7:30 parent, can you do 8 o'clock? And 9:30, 10 o'clock parent, can you do 8:30? And God bless him, he said, I'll go one better. I'll do 8 o'clock. Let's see how it works. They both put the child to bed at 8. All the difference in the world. The teacher, a couple of weeks later, said to me, I don't know what you did, but the problem is resolved. All the time now, he's well rested. He's not falling asleep in class. His work is done. And I'm like, yeah, a little consistency goes a long way here. And that's your point, is as consistent as we can be between households, that's important. That's best for your child.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's true. And the child then doesn't get confused by conflicting rules in
Right.
each home. And so if the parents can be on the same page with regard to minor matters, I think it's easier, not easy, but easier for them to work through major decisions where they do have shared parenting responsibility, or joint custody is sometimes called.
Uh-huh.
Uh, if they can work through and establish a pattern of working through minor issues like, and I think a judge would call a bedtime issue a minor issue. And really, I don't think judges enjoy getting embroiled in those types of decisions. They would
No,
prefer not to.
right. And they're not going to, as a rule. They're not going to. They're not going to order a certain bedtime.
No.
They just don't dictate people's lives like that. And some parents don't get that. They think if they ask the judge for it, the judge will order it, and that other parent will have to observe this certain bedtime or something like that. And it just doesn't work that way. And I also have parents, I mean, God bless these two that I just told you about, because they at least worked together and they did what ended up being best for their child. I get parents who they're so determined not to let the other parent control them that they intentionally keep doing whatever they're doing that isn't working for their child. And they're doing it just to spite the other parent, the whole time overlooking the fact that they are harming their child, that this is not beneficial to your child. And I don't know how to get them to love their child more than they hate their ex.
Well, they can love their child more than they hate their ex, or they can love going to court.
Right, right.
I mean, really, those are their choices, and uh, the choice is obvious to most people if they're not caught up in the anger and hurt of the moment. If they can step away from that and look rationally at what's best for their child, then I think that's the way to go. And usually, that's not going to happen in a courtroom. Parents who go to court become more guarded with each other. They become more
Mhm.
suspicious of each other. So really taking the high road out of court is usually the better means to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it might be in mediation that you work it out, or it might be having a parenting coordinator, decision maker, something like that. But anything is better than going to court.
Although
That
for
is
the
really true.
lawyers, we're ready and willing to go.
Oh,
So
yes,
we
you are. Yes, you are. When you said earlier that you're warriors, that's true. And that's your job. It's your job. Yeah. All right. Time to take another quick break, but we'll be right back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. I'm going to go back to what we were talking about right before we went to break, not to pick on you at all. In fact, it's to explain why attorneys do behave the way they do. You use the word warrior to describe attorneys, and that's your job. I mean, people sometimes don't realize. I hear all the time in my office that my ex's attorney is awful. He's horrible. And I say, he's probably a good attorney. If you are thinking he is awful or horrible, he or she is probably a really good attorney. Your job, your job is to advocate for that parent. And we talked just last week about being a counselor, stepping into the counselor role more than the advocate role. And I know there's times that you have to do that. But again, do you want to explain to people, that attorneys are advocates, so you're going to be a warrior?
We're advocates in an adversarial system,
Yeah.
and we are obligated by law to follow the client's definition of their goal for the outcome of the litigation. So if we get a parent who says, I don't want that other parent to have any time at all with the children,
Mhm.
then we need to try desperately hard to reason with the client and say how that's not going to impress the judge at all because of the obligation of the parents to encourage the sharing of love, affection, and contact with the other parent and the child. So we have to be careful about that, but we will fight at the drop of a hat And so it's often difficult. We have to balance those roles of attorney and counselor and try to shift into the counselor mode as much as possible and encourage alternative resolution modes to litigation.
Yes, yes. And the thing that you mentioned in there that I want to emphasize, because again, just yesterday, I was explaining this to a parent on the phone that ultimately the client is in control of what you do. I mean, you can give them their options, but what option they choose, I mean, not that they have to do anything you say, that's why you're there to give them legal advice and to give them options. But whatever option they choose, you are compelled to follow that. And an issue came up where the one parent was saying, I cannot believe the attorney for the other parent filed that, something that was filed with the court. And I said, well, I can simply because it's really up to the other parent, not the attorney, if they're going to file that or not. And I said, now, knowing your ex as you do, don't you think it was probably that person rather than the attorney who said, yes, let's file that? And then this parent said, oh, yes, absolutely. But that's really how it works is you might even advocate or advise your client to take option A instead of option B. But if they choose option B, that's pretty much what you have to do, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And so we really, I think a lot of times clients don't understand that the most valuable thing they can derive from the attorney client relationship is our advice and counsel.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because
Well, I can imagine.
I think most family law attorneys are aware that we get typically a better, more healthy result when we reach a parenting plan that is not litigated.
Yes, yes, amen to that. And I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for an attorney when they strongly suggest option A, but we can do option B, and the client says, nope, I want to do B. I can't imagine how frustrating that is. I mean, I don't know how you do it.
Well, it can be frustrating, but we understand that again, we're dealing with people who are angry and
Hmm.
hurt,
Hmm.
and often they want to lash out any way they can.
Well, and they let their emotions guide their actions.
Right. And so
You
we
know,
have to try to counsel them and advise them to mitigate that tendency to just give in to their anger and emotions.
yes, yes. And something that it's actually a gal, an attorney that I do the level one co parenting class with, often tells parents think about when your children are grown and you're sitting around the dinner table with now adult children. What do you want them to look back and remember and say to you? Like, thank you for keeping us out of the middle of the conflict and always letting us love both parents? Or do you want them to say, why? Why did you have to tear us apart? Why did you have to expose us to all of that and make us pick between parents? And, what do you want them to say when they're adults? And if people can stop and think about that in this moment, because like you said, they're angry, they're hurt, they're, whatever they're feeling, they might be feeling betrayed by someone who they thought would always love them. I mean, there's
Mhm.
just a lot of negative emotions going on there.
There really are. And so it takes some skill and I think some experience to be able to balance the attorney and the counselor role.
Hmm. Yes, yes. And you often, we've talked about this before, but you often get those people who say, I want a bulldog of an attorney. And I tried to tell them, no, you don't. You want somebody who's logical and rational and can give you good advice, not just, let's go get them. you know.
Well, a lot of times that let's go get 'em attitude resonates with the
Mhm.
client, and
Mhm.
that's really what they're looking for, and hopefully they end up with an attorney who can move them off of that position a little bit and really bring them back down to earth and educate them as to what's going to be most healthful for their children.
Mhm. Yes. And one of those things is getting back to our point and our topic today, you're not going to be able to control what the other parent does during their parenting time.
No, and I think that that lack of control, that disconnect, especially for a parent who has been a primary caretaker, is very
Mhm.
difficult.
Yes. Yes. Because let's face it, in a marriage, there usually is one parent who is more the caretaker, more the decision maker for the children. Might not be the same parent who is kind of the decision maker for the family as a whole, or things around the house, or things like that. But the one who kind of made decisions more for the children, that's really hard for them to give up. In fact, I had a mom ask me just the other day, "So I don't get to know where they are when they're with him?" And I said, "No, you really don't." And she just couldn't fathom that she would not know where her child was, or children. I think it was more than one, but anyway, they just can't fathom. They don't understand when they go through divorce what co-parenting is going to look like.
No, and whether a parent takes the children for pizza or hamburgers, that's
Right.
not a decision that the absentee parent is going to be involved with.
No, no. And same with clothing, of that list that I read off earlier. The other one I get a lot is he or she brought them with no coat. Okay, that's awful. That's bad parenting. But nobody's going to care. I mean, the court doesn't want to hear it. The judge doesn't want to hear you come in and say, he or she didn't put a coat on our child. You know,
No,
they just don't want to hear it.
no, the judge is not there really to micromanage the
No,
parenting relationship post decree or
no,
post separation. So,
right.
and they really don't want to be involved and embroiled in those micromanagement decisions at all.
No, no, they don't. And I really do want to get into more rules of co-parenting. We're out of time or close to it for today, but in coming weeks we'll talk more about that. But I also think, just to give people a spoiler alert, I also think we should look at the best interest of the child statute sometime soon and share that with the audience.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I do too, and I would love to do that. All right, we are almost out of time. Thank you, as always, George, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Marlene, for having me. Always a pleasure.
You bet, you bet. All right, this is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.